Hi, I'm the Queen of Kingsbury, and welcome back. So this is a continuation of the review of Prince Harry's book, Spare. And in this episode, we'll be covering chapters 15 on. I think I'll get about another 7 chapters in. So, okay, well, thanks again for joining me, and we'll just start with that. And chapter 15 is the first chapter we'll cover today. And Harry mentions in chapter 15 the famous phrase, there were 3 people in this marriage. So we're talking about Princess Diana's interview with Martin Bashir, where she alludes to Camilla being the 3rd person in their marriage. And so I'm here to remind everyone that that interview was manipulated, and it was proven that it was manipulated by Bashir, who was working on behalf. Martin Bashir was working on behalf of the BBC at that time, and so Harry says about that phrase, you know, there's no mention of the kids. Why 3 people? What about us? I'm sure he understands that a marriage is between 2 people, and the family have together. But those 2 people are your family. Your children are not really not part of your marriage. It's very, very true. I don't know. Anyway, I'm making that point from his point. So he felt the presence of Camilla, okay, and felt guilty for never doing anything about it. So I don't know what he or William could have done about his father's relationship with Camilla. I'm sure it would not have made a difference. Harry was just too young at the time. He talks about the lack of warmth in his home and his father wanting to go public with Camilla. And this meant he and William would meet her. So that's inevitable that William and Harry will have a meeting with their father's girlfriend at this point. And I think William goes first. He doesn't actually say that, but he says William had said to him she made an effort, which, what more do you want? I don't know any child who's going to absolutely love their parents' love interest after they're widowed or divorced. It just happens. It's difficult. It's very difficult. And that it was his turn to meet Camilla. Harry said he prepared himself as if he was getting an injection. He felt since he wasn't the heir, his bit, and I quote, his bit with her is merely a formality. Okay, well, I don't know where he gets this low self-esteem. I don't know if Diana living would have made any difference. Did her dying all of a sudden make him feel he was irrelevant, or was he feeling irrelevant even when she was alive? That's an interesting question, and for sure this boy and then this man definitely needs therapy. I'm not making fun of him. I'm saying it as a fact. As a fact, coming from a broken home myself, and then losing a parent in a tragic car accident. I had that same experience. I didn't get therapy, and I probably would have benefited greatly by it. And I think so would have he and his brother. Okay, surprise, surprise. Yes, his brother. He describes Charles as having vacant looks, empty sighs, little things slip. So I think his father wasn't happy. You know, he needed somebody on more of a regular basis, not just kids, but a significant other. You know, Camilla. He talks about Gordonston. That was his father's grade school or boarding school when he was young, and the bullies there, and how there was a hierarchy in his father's school, And he being bookish, that's his father, he was picked on for that. And he later in his life still had a teddy bear from his childhood to soothe him from those memories. Okay, no boarding school. Good at boarding school. I remember a quote from Harry's cousin's husband. So Harry's cousin is Zara Phillips. She married Mike Tyndall, and Mike Tyndall said boarding school is like child abuse. So I think he was asked about his children with Zara, whether they're going to boarding school. I don't think they will be. So I go on. So anyway, I feel like he might even be making fun of Charles needing a teddy bear in his older years. I mean, if this is part of Charles's way of coping, Harry, are you bullying your father? Maybe you're bullying Charles. You know, let him have it if it makes him feel better. So he and William asked their father not to marry Camilla. They endorsed her, but they asked that he don't marry because the wedding could cause a lot of controversy and just bring attention and comparisons towards their mother. He said Camilla played the long game, campaigned for marriage and the crown. I don't know if everyone else sees it that way. Of course, I don't even know how close he was to her at this time, or even to his father. But he claims that Camilla or her PR people, he called them spin doctors, possibly leaked information of William's private conversation with her to the press. And he deems her dangerous. What makes that dangerous when you're claiming the palace has done that either for generations or at least your whole life and your father's whole life? How is that all of a sudden dangerous? I don't feel that that's fair to Camilla. If it's dangerous, then it's the palace machine that's dangerous, not Camilla. So she campaigned to marry somebody she loved. Is that dangerous? You know, his mother was out of the picture. She had died. And they were divorced. They were divorced first. Okay. Chapter 16. He started Eton. That's the high school level. I think it's called Eton College. That's the high school level in Great Britain or England compared to United States high school ages. So he was 14. So that would be high school for us here in the US. So he described the school and the founder, Henry VI, and he calls him his ancestor. Well, technically, I've heard on the internet a lot of people saying that that's not actually his ancestor. So he may not be of that same bloodline, but certainly he was an ancestor in the royal family, monarchy. So I did look it up. His lineage is not directly, I'll say Edward. Yeah, I mean, I think there was possibly a conflict and he had no heirs. So I'll have to look it up. I'm going to look it up and maybe I'll put it on the bottom of the screen. I thought I looked it up, but I don't see in my notes here. So yeah, so direct bloodline, no, but what did happen? Anyway, that's not too important. Another fact that the ghostwriter, the publisher, and Harry maybe not got completely right, but I understand what he's talking about by ancestor. He talked about the French classes being too tough, and the teachers assured him it'd be all right. His grades were not good, and he feels that he would have done better if not forced to go to the best school in England for young boys. So I feel for him there. He was forced into a school that was too tough for him. So William was there. And they shared a dormitory, manor house. And his brother William was on the upper floors while he was on the first floor. And he says, again, William said William was there and asked him to pretend not to know him. Typical older brother, as if anybody would think that Harry and William don't know each other. William did explain why Eton was his sanctuary. He just wanted to be, you know, a young man away from his pesky younger brother. But did Harry see this? No, he has resentment, real resentment, even as a grown-up. This was never addressed, apparently, with therapy. You know, William was going through the same pain from, what is he, 2 years older than Harry? 2.5 years older, maybe? I mean, that's not really a big difference. He was still very young when he lost the same mom. This was one of the things that maybe William was moving on meaning with his own young life at this high school level, Eton College, and Harry just didn't like it. But I don't know if anything would have been very different if Diana had been alive. Maybe it would have been the same. I feel like this is a little anecdote. I feel like Harry was looking at William as a substitute for his mom because he wasn't getting what he needed, that emotional connection that he needed from his father. So he thought he'd probably get it from his brother once his mom died, but William was moving on. Okay, chapter 17. There were 60 boys in Manor House, their dormitory. Most were very at ease with what was going on there. He describes them as if they were born there. Behaved very naturally in its environment. So he complains also he was at the bottom, starting over. Well, everybody goes through that when they make that pathway from younger year grade school to high school level or college level. He was, it was no different than any of the other boys in their first year. But he talks about the pain, and his best friend Hennessy went to a different, or Hennessy, I gotta look that up, who is the other Henry at their grade school, didn't go to Eton, so he went to a different school. And he says he didn't know how to get dressed in the morning. What kind of statement is this? He's 14. I'm confused. The uniform was too difficult? Okay. Well, okay, maybe there was a little learning curve. He describes the uniform as being complicated. It was basically a perpetual mourning outfit that was designed by Henry IV for some reason. Torture for a boy who had just lost his mother. It's a little melodramatic. I must say, I'll move in a little closer. Come on, Harry. You're going to one of the best schools. You're going to complain about not knowing how to get dressed? I'd say it's a little... It seems like he's searching for things to put in this book, my opinion. He was lucky to be there. Yeah, he definitely needed a therapist. I feel sad that he didn't get it at that time and when it was needed. So he decided to be in sports, and I think that was a really healthy thing for him to do. He called it dry sports. I suppose the wet sports would have been like water polo and stuff like that. Rugby was his. And he indulged in his rage. He called it the red mist. Claimed to not have felt the pain from the sports at all, because the pain was too great inside. Chapter 18. He describes a game they played in the corridors called corridor cricket, and one of his dorm mates smashed his face in and cut his tongue really badly, but they all continued and played anyway. I don't think that's unusual. Kids that age, young men, young women too, think they're invincible. They just keep doing things even if somebody gets hurt. That's a normal thing. That's my opinion. I think it was normal for the kids to keep playing it, including him. So one day, at the end of his first half, he said he shaved his head on a dare, and his mates cut it off, and he was very agreeable. And when he looked in the mirror, he freaked, screamed, and ran up. For the first time, he broke, what did he say? He broke the rule, because William said, don't, pretend not to know me. So he went upstairs to see William, and he went in his room, and William was studying, and he just started laughing at Harry. And he laughed too. "Harold, what have you done?" he said. So William calls Harry Harold, and Harry calls his brother Willie. So Harry said he was not helpful. What do you expect? He was laughing. At this point, I think, I really think it's obvious William was going through his own thing. And then he goes on to say the Daily Mail printed a computer-generated picture of Harry, having heard that this incident happened, and called him Harry the Skinhead, which is just not good. But I feel like maybe he's right. Maybe at this point, now he hasn't talked about that, but maybe he's right. At this point, the palace could have put out a statement. That's an exaggeration. He shaved his head on a dare. Just tell the truth. But Harry was very affected by these slanderous tabloid things that he feels he was taken advantage of, by the tabloids, and made money off of him. Okay, chapter 19. He says it gets worse. So he broke his thumb while doing sports, and they had to send him to the hospital. And the tabloids exploited this and said something like he was on life support, and they exaggerated the situation, having been brought to the hospital. So that is when his father did get involved, and they said this was getting too, he put a complaint in, and it was getting too much. And Harry had made a comment in this chapter how royals used to be viewed as divine, and now they're viewed as insects. I really wonder where he got that quote, if he got that later in life, or if his father had ever mentioned that. He didn't say, but what grandiose thinking for a young boy. No, it has changed over the centuries, for sure. But I think maybe his grandmother was the last to think it was, she had her divine right as monarch. Now, Charles never said that when he became king. He said something like it was an accident of birth that brought him there. He also mentions that he noticed in the tabloid article that the writing by the journalist was horrible. By using, the sentences had too many of the word "but" in it, and it was not phrased correctly. But if I may add, when you're writing for a paper, a journal, it's a different type of writing. It's certainly not like writing a paper for Eton. You do use a different type of language in journalism. Even if it was wrong, I mean, I just think that the point may be got lost with Harry. Okay, chapter 20. Okay, naughty Harry became the dogma. And he wanted to be noble, good, and meaningful. But he was just deemed naughty, and I suppose he took that on his shoulder and just was. And he said his grades were bad, and this was double hard because Eton was a real bad match for him. Well, he's got my sympathies there. He was sent to this school probably because it was easy security, easy to have the security there, his secure place. His brother was already there. Why not? What better thing for brothers to be together? But it was probably needed for him to be in a different school, that more matched his school level, his grades. I completely sympathize with him on that point. Okay, so he said he couldn't read a book alone. He was resisting this. And then he goes on to explain that he didn't want to use his memory because when you read, you have to remember things. And if he was reading a book, that means he would have to engage his memory. This obviously goes back to his mother's death. So, again, that's mental health. He could memorize quotes from movies. He mentioned The Lion King and Family Guy, maybe. Long quotes, but he couldn't do it. But things changed after her death. So his father had a love of books and was disappointed that Harry might be the opposite of him, avoiding books. Compares himself with Hamlet when he read a passage. And he went to Stratford to listen to Shakespeare with his father. And he said the words burned too close to home. All that lives must die was hard for him to hear, that quote. Yeah. Then he talks of his favorite book, Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck. Okay, so he must have read that at Eton. And he explains it being a very plain and simple. Yes, Steinbeck did write like that. He compared Lenny and Jim, those are the characters, to he and Willie, their brother. A guy goes nuts if he ain't got nobody is one of the quotes from the book, and he really related to that. Friendship, brothers, loyalty. He wondered where that was in his life. He wanted to share this with William, but somehow he couldn't. Chapter 21. Marco took the brothers to Botswana on a safari. So his father had told him he's going with William on a safari. This sounds like a spring break thing, a spring break trip. They took a British Airways flight, and Tiggy, his nanny, who she called friend, not nanny, went along with them, and he really liked Tiggy. He says he was always comfortable and happy around her, which says a lot. You know, Diana felt she was a rival. He talks about this, a rival with her. Now we know where that came from. That was fed to her by Martin Bashir. He doesn't talk about that in this book, though. Did Mommy see Tiggy as his spare, he says. Replacement? Maybe. She was divorced at this time. And, you know, I would imagine Charles needed help. You know, he's not going to be able to do everything, busy schedule, and being the man of his generation and the type of man he was, he needed help. That is not unusual. I think Harry was very lucky to have Tiggy. How dreadful for her to have felt that. Wow. So he describes getting to Botswana and the beautiful river that's there. The description is beyond enchanting, and this is most definitely the Ghost Rider, as we all know by now. I couldn't imagine Harry's words, but we'll give him that much, that he was, he did love his time there and how beautiful it was. So they met dozens of people in Botswana, and they were introduced and was very happy. They met them. Marco, who was, I suppose he was in charge of William, he was William's bodyguard, was a man who commanded the room, the party, life of the party, and was always in charge and very orderly. He definitely describes him as a man that he looked up to and was excited to be around, and was also very happy to be on this trip with William and with Marco. He describes, yes, Marco took charge and got the camp all in order. And there was a fire every night, and it was hypnotizing. He really did fall in love with this continent and this country at that time. So chapter 22, Marco, he talks about his volume, how loud he is. And he's an extreme ginger, red hair, a perpetual doer. Now that is definitely a good person to look up to, I think. He was a leader, continues. He really wanted to be like him. He says Willie, this is William, remained distant during this trip, which I don't know why it would change, but I do feel sorry for Harry, but I also think it's important to point out that William's also going through not only the later stages of puberty, but missing his mother just as Harry is. You know, could William have been dealing with his own issues, his own demons at that time? It's possible to William, maybe his brother reminded him of his mom. Who knows? I can only speculate, having gone through this with two older sisters myself. Later on in life, we would contact each other, even, you know, once we moved out of our mother's home. Every time I heard their voice, I was reminded of my childhood. And in that memory somewhere was the loss of my father and the separation of my parents and all that tragedy. It came up. And their voice, just their presence, often reminded each other. I mean, I know it did with my sisters too. When they contacted me, that we were all reminded of those days when a tragedy hit us. So maybe these things were hitting home to William too. And since they didn't talk about it, maybe Harry thought he was the only one going through these things. It just seems like there's a lack of understanding for his own brother, who he wanted to be so close with, who was literally going through the same exact thing he was. So, okay, that's the end of my review for tonight, and thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my review of Spare, chapters 15 to 22. All right, I'll catch you next time. It should be tomorrow with the next about seven chapters. Thank you for watching. This is the Queen of Kingsbury. Till next time, bye.